number 2, which is titled Background to Himru and Other Islamic Textiles. Our chair for the session is Ms. Manjari Nirula. Our speakers are Ms. Jasleen Damija and Dr. Gara Hijabi Kadumi. May I request you all to please come to the dais. Ms. Manjari Nirula is the Senior Vice President of World Crafts Council, Asia Pacific Region, and the past President of Delhi Crafts Council. She has over 35 years of experience with revival of languishing crafts, documentation and design development, and marketing of crafts.
Is that okay? Would you like to go further up?
Yes, please.
A little more?
Yeah, sure.
No, don't.
Because this is.
So, good. Is it afternoon now? Is it after 12? Yes. Not quite. So, good morning. Yes. We've had a wonderful first session this morning. And now we start with the second one, which is the panel, where I have these two iconic women with me who need no introduction, but I'm going to make some kind of an effort towards saying a little bit about them. Jasleen Damija, my mentor, the person who has taught me so many things. You too? And how many more here? There you go. There you go. So Jasleen's life embodies the rich and vibrant textile heritage of India. She has years of knowledge, understanding, and experience on the subject. For over 6 decades, she has been a pioneer in the research and revival of the textile traditions of this country, as well as Iran, Africa, Central Asia, the Balkans, and Southeast Asia. Since the time India achieved independence, Jasleen has been documenting and working with handicrafts and hand-woven textiles. Through her commanding personality, her eloquent oratorical skills, and her highly evolved sense of aesthetics. She has inspired and mentored many of us, as I can see here today. So, may I request you to give us a little bit of insight into what you know through Suraiya on your own about this wonderful subject that we talk about today, Himru.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Manju, for all those kind words. I look around and I see the most extraordinary people gathered here. And even those who are not here are represented. My beloved, my most beloved friend, Elsie Shalom, my lifelong friend, is represented by her son, Daniel. Daniel sent me an email to say, are you going to be in Delhi? I'm coming on the 23rd. So I said to her, you have to come on the 23rd. It's perhaps the last time I will be speaking. And he said, oh, okay, I'll try. And he did. He's here, Daniel. Please wish everybody. Daniel, you've forgotten your Indianness. Please stand up and wish everybody. I knew Daniel when he was 8 years old. Since then, he has grown a little older. And I have this honor, delight to be in front of you, my beloved friend, whom I knew so long ago. We met in, in Miranda House.
Oh, wow.
She had come from Hyderabad to study in Miranda House, and that's where I met her. And we knew each other so well. I had the privilege of staying at her home in Hyderabad when I visited her and received a lot of affection from her mother. Wonderful, warm, affectionate Kubra Begum. You remember? We were together, and how she used to delicately cook for us. And I came to know her aunts, I came to know her cousins, I came to know her friends, and I became a part of your family. Later on, I met her other family when she became a person who moved to the beautiful Safrani estate near the Qutub Shahi tombs and near the Dargah Hussain Shahwali. And she was part of the whole atmosphere of that. She gave us the atmosphere of the Sufi traditions. I learned from her about these traditions. We shared an involvement with the textiles and the crafts. And one moved around the beautiful Kalamkari, exquisitely revived, the woven daris, the innumerable creative traditions such as the paitani, such as the daris, such as various other things, and the textiles, the Mangalagiri, fine gossamer as your beauty. And we moved around, looked at her Venkatagiris, looked at the myriads of patterns, and John Bissell encouraged Suraiya, as did Bim Bissell, and as did the dynamic William Nanda Bissell, who galvanized Fab India's director, and Fab India had 211 workshops, representatives, places all over India and in other parts of the world. And it is a remarkable story which has been told beautifully by you. And it is something that we are. Bim, I was just talking about you. I was saying that I was saying that it was John Bissell, the wonderful, tender, gentle man who initiated this extraordinary movement. It was Fab India. It was John Bissell. And I had the privilege of working with him. He was gentle. He was kind. He had a terrific sense of humor. And he was loving in many ways and in all ways. He encouraged Suraiya. He was so gentle to her. He felt she was the epitome of tenderness. Her ada, her way of speech, her relationship with everybody was something extreme. And then there was Bim. Bim, warm, loving, a person whom I knew also in Miranda House. True? True. And also that fantastic, dynamic William Nanda Bissell, who built what Fab India is today. Today, Fab India has 211, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct, it is
Yes.
over 320 stores.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You see, I'm old, left behind.
Outdated.
And isn't this extraordinary that, and he has taken it beyond. And they say that when the child grows beyond the guru, as he has done, then the Guru is great. And that is what has happened with Familia. And I am very grateful that I have had this opportunity to speak today and to express my feeling of the close association that I had, which has been a privilege. Dearest, beloved Suraiya, thank you for coming here. Thank you for agreeing, and thank you, Bim, for bringing her here. We are so grateful to you that you brought her here, and every one of us who are sitting here. Oh, you've come. And my beloved niece, Kavita, I'm grateful to you for coming. And Shivrato, thank you for coming. And it's wonderful. I see so many, my niece whom I bullied into coming, Ranu, and this wonderful woman who organized this Ritu. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Ritu. She has ways of getting people to come, and I am very happy. And dear Gada, where are you?
Right next to you.
I am here at your side.
You know, I'm so
She's on your left.
left.
Yeah.
I thought, oh God,
She hasn't left.
she hasn't left. You're a man. Gara, this is an indication of old age. So forgive me.
That's because you shifted to my side.
And sorry, getting knocked over by your personality. And I rang up Gada because I felt when we are talking about Himru, but who else but Gada should speak? Who am I to speak? Because she has written a book on Islamic textiles, and she's the president of the South Pacific and the World Council. And so I rang her, where are you, Gada? Oh, I am in Malaysia. Oh, I see. Where will you be on the 23rd? She said, now what's coming? What do you want? I said, I need you here on the 23rd. And lo and behold, Gada said, I will try. I said, no, Gada, you just have to come. And she said she will come, and she came. So we are all privileged to have everybody here with us. And I won't bore you, I hope not. But I wanted to first speak to my beloved friend Suraiya, whom I have known all my life, and then present to all of you, and especially to her, the work that she has done with Himru and also on Islamic textiles. Textile trade was an important source of wealth for the state and the people. An important and exceptional woven hand embroidered panel known as the altiras, which were distinctive woven and embroidered panels, celebrated the garments created for the caliphate and royalty. The house of tiras, Dar al-Tiras, were an essential part of the elaborate textiles which were a part of the Islamic court. These elaborate speciality of the weaves of silk and cotton, as well as the use of gold thread, which became known as kamhwab, which were known as no less than a dream. These elaborate fabrics, which were linked with the Islamic traditions to preparing the annual covering of the Kaaba, Kasawat al-Kaaba. The elaborate tradition of the Dar al-Tiras were an elaborate part of the organized religious hierarchy of the organizers of the Dar al-Tiras, which were well kept in strict control of the quality of the materials as well as the skill in creating the distinctive used designs by royal Dar al-Tiras. The inscriptional textiles included the full or abbreviated names of the Caliph, preceded by the dua, the recitation of the prayer, and occasionally the name of the blessed hands of the master weavers and the place of the embroiderer. They elaborated the sacred, the royal, and the powerful honored by the state function. A poet, Abu Ali al-Tabuki, celebrated the woven or embroidered tiras borders. The white telasan, a refined, flowing outer garments, flowed like the flowing river, while the tiras was the bridge over the river. Each Islamic state of the world had its own distinctive Dar al-Tiras. This was linked to the places of power, the Friday mosque, the religious place of power, the mosque, and the important places of wealth, which were the center of trade, the bazaar. These were spread throughout the Islamic world. These were the Dar al-Tiras, important centers of design. Many of these Dar al-Tiras developed a range of textiles designs which were known all over the world, and they influenced the growth and development of the designs of the area. One of the most important designs were the elaborate brocades, and Himru as well as the Mashru were the two very important Islamic textiles which were fabrics created for the devout who were not supposed to wear silk next to the skin, and cotton was to be worn to the skin. Because of this tradition of style of wearing, the silk and cotton fabrics on the two separate looms, and each loom carried separate fabric. One of them carried twill cotton thread, and the other carried the thread for the silk. The earlier looms were known as the pagar loom, a double-sided loom where a minimum of 2 weavers were required to be seated. One loom carried silk, which created the shiny silk weft, and the second one was the cotton weft and the elaborate flowing patterned silk brocades, which were used for the creation of the silken pattern woven for royalty, and the creation of the flowing silken patterns, the elaborate one to be worn by the bridegroom, sherwani to be worn by the royalty. This special fabrics was the speciality of the Himru. The silken brocade and the silk which was to be worn above the skin, it was forbidden for the true observer of religious practices of Islam were forbidden, and that was Himru, which was forbidden to be worn next to the skin. Both of these, Mashru and Himru, were for the devout, and they were only to be worn by those who believed. The flowing silk, jala brocaded old technique of the jacquard was very important and created in the creation of the jala. These were connected with the tradition which were created by the followers of Bahauddin, and he was the great follower of the Sufi tradition, and they moved away from Bukhara and moved from Bukhara to India and came to Surat. And in Surat, from Surat, because of some disasters which took place, they moved to 5 or 6 centers. And one of the most important are the ones that were and was in Banaras. And they produced the very extraordinary brocades, and that brocade was woven in Banaras itself. Some of them even moved to the southern part, and some of them remained in Banaras itself. There is one of them who came to Andhra, and they were also connected with the traditions of Aurangabad. And these movements created richness of designs in these areas. Himru carried silken weft foliage patterns, and these linear patterns, using the jala as a means of creating the designs, were the richness and the importance of the designs of the Himru. The weft was cotton, which created the cotton base, and the silken thread, which only appeared above the weft, was the one which appeared in the area itself. The richly woven Himru was used essentially for the creation of the sherwani, and that sherwani was the privilege of the royalty and the elite, as well as of the bridegrooms of the elite families of the area. The elaborate sherwanis were an essential dress of the bridegroom. It was also the essential dress of the elite men of Aurangabad. The range of patterns were absorbed from Egypt, Syria, Morocco, and became a part of the rich repertoire of the Himru traditions of Aurangabad. The women's shawl, which derived its elaborate patterns from the elaborate designs developed from the Kashmir designs. Many designers of shawls were under the impression that the designs were derived from Persia, but in actuality, the refined patterns were derived from the elaborate patterns of Kashmir, which found a market throughout the world. The traditions of Aurangabad was that were shifted and moved to the area, and this was in the brought by Muhammad bin Tughlaq in early 14th century, 1336. The last emperor shifted to Devgiri, 1326, and in the present day, Aurangabad, renamed as Daulatabad, many Himru weavers remained in Aurangabad. The richness of the Himru was revived by the wonderful work which was done by Suraiya. She once again revived, as you have heard, so explicitly on the work which has been done by her, and we are grateful to her that one of the finest traditions have been revived by dearest Suraiya. I have no more to say than to say that there are people here who have also done wonderful revival work, as Jenny Houseco and as you, but Suraiya has worked without stopping to consider, can I, should I, nor did they. And we are honored that we have such people in our midst. Um, I don't want to take too much of your time. I would only like to say that I'm very privileged to have had this opportunity to share my love for these rich traditions, for those who revived these rich traditions, and for having been privileged to be their friends, from whom I have learned and with whom I have lived a life of richness, of love, and of affection. And I thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasleen, for such a lyrical interpretation of these very rich traditions that you've talked about. Unlike the first session, I'm going to request if there are any questions, let's ask them now, because then we'll be going on to the Islamic textiles. Yes?
Jasleen, I have to say to you, if it hadn't been for our meeting in Iran all those many, many years ago, I might not have ever devoted my life to textiles.
Anybody else?
Good morning, ma'am, and thank you for this absolutely wonderful introduction. I'm quite intrigued with one of the mentions of the Sufis, because in the area of both Daulatabad, the Panchakki, and that entire area, and also the Kashmiri Hamdani tradition of engaging with crafts, with textiles. If you could just elaborate, because that is what intrigued me, the migration, the exchange of ideas from Kashmir to Aurangabad on the Sufi trail, and that is what has intrigued me.
You didn't give your name.
Navina Jaffa.
Parveez?
Navina Jaffa.
You know her. Of course you
Navina.
know.
I was wondering who could have asked a question like that, which is so close to my heart. It was in Iran when I lived and worked there for 7 years that I got very involved with the Sufi tradition. And before that, I had got very involved with the Sufi tradition. It's really unbelievable. With the tradition of the Bahauddin Naqshbandi.
Yes.
Bahauddin Naqshbandi was the person who was I think, the 12th century. And he was the the great master, because all traditions of crafts, and especially of weaving, had a peer who was associated. And Bahauddin Suraiya Bibi, Bahauddin Naqshbandi, was the master of the making of the jala, and that spread all over. And I was working on the Baluchari tradition of weaving, and that took me to a study of the association with the Sufi traditions which were connected with the weaving. And then when I went to work in Iran, the connection became even closer. And Bahauddin Naqshbandi's contribution became richly imbibed into my being. And this tradition in Iran brought the richness of the Naqshbandas. And how strange that you should have, but how correct that you should have asked this question.
It's just unlike any other Sufi tradition, the Naqshbands meditate through breath, almost like a pranayam.
Sorry, through
Breath.
breath.
So, unlike the Chishtis who do the zikr through music, the Naqshbands use pranayam, breath. And I was just, as you were speaking, when the weft and the warp, and how that is so close to the whole ethos of a meditative journey. And it reminds me of Gandhi and also the spinning of the wheel, the idea of meditative, just to add to what you were saying.
There is a tradition in Iran. They create the namdas, which are created by the namdas which are created by the Turkomans in the northern part of Iran. They have a senf. Senf is like a cooperative, you know, and also like believers in the craft tradition. And they call out, and their belief of a perfect Nanda is the one which is created by the movement and the calling out of the name of Hazrat Ali, the name of the Lord, Ya Tu, Ya Tu. And this act of the creation of the correct rhythm, there have to be X number of, I don't remember exactly, but I will give you the name of my book, which you may like to refer, because I don't exactly remember. There are exact number of rhythms which have to be observed to be able to create a perfect namda. And while doing research on the namda in Iran, I came to know of this. And the warp and the weft, the inner soul and the outer call, because they call, that is something which is very closely connected with textiles. And you breathe in and you breathe out. You are absorbed as you were. And through your absorption, you created.
There's a subject for your next book, lady. There's a subject for your next
Thank you so
book.
much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Justine.
How nice that you are here. I can't believe it. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for giving this prasad. It's really a prasad.
Of course. The last one? Yes.
You talked about how the
Name, please.
I'm sorry, I'm Shaibani. I'm actually Suraiya's niece. And I had a question about Himru being on cotton. You said the devout were not allowed to wear silk against their body. And does this tradition happen anywhere else, or why did it come up just in India?
All over.
It was everywhere? So you had Himru equivalent?
But women were not prohibited. It were the men.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting.
You see, that's interesting. And it was not,
Saving grace.
One good thing.
it was the women were not prohibited. Gold was also prohibited
Yes.
for the devout.
Oh, that's...
I mean, it's amazing. And I forgot to mention, you see, Budapa. I forgot to mention that Mashru was also the tradition where the warp used to be cotton and the weft used to be silk. And the patterns that they drew were in stripes. And those striped patterns created a linearity which was typical of mushroom. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that.
So where else did we find this cotton silk mixture across?
In a lot of the Islamic and the Dar al-Tiraz were the factories which created the designs which were distributed all over the Islamic country, and they themselves you found them in many Islamic traditions.
So do the designs also have connection to Iran or any other Islamic country where you had similar fabric? Or you said the designs come from Kashmir?
No, the thing is that that uh, the designs for the that were created for the shawl of the Himru. I'm talking about that the shawls of the Himru, which had linear patterns and therefore very thin layers of silk, which did not penetrate to these to the weft. That is what were the patterns which were created. Now, these patterns, they were really influenced by the Kashmir woven designs rather than being influenced by the sort of the effect and the impact was different. Now, there are some who believe that these may have come from also from Central Asia. And that is something which needs to be investigated further.
Thank you for your question, which I think has opened up a whole lot of things that you had not said. So thank you so much, Jasleen.
My
For this
pleasure.
wonderful, wonderful, and of course, again, remembering John through all of this. Thank you. Next we have, and Jasleen has already made the connection for all of us.
Thank you.
But I have great pleasure in welcoming my president, Dr. Gada Hijabi Kadumi, who is a remarkable person whose exceptional academic and career achievements are an inspiration to many young people. She is a scholar with an interdisciplinary academic background. Also, she is the first woman from West Asia to be elected president of the World Crafts Council Asia Pacific region, which she got in 2013 and continues till 2020. Her most remarkable recent achievement has been sponsoring a craft encyclopedia, of which Ritu is also a part of, which contains entries from 120 writers from 50 countries. It is a unique overview of the creative spirit that continues in our part of the world. The subject of her talk today is going to be the Islamic textile industry, which I think we've had a little brief from Jasleen already on. Yeah. But over to you, Gada. Thank you.
Is it working?
Yes, it's working.
Yeah, okay. Good afternoon, everybody. In fact, I was asked to come and give a presentation on Islamic art. I thought I will come to the podium and just give my presentation, then maybe receive few questions, etc. But I found myself, in a milieu with such wonderful people where there is, intimacy, unity, passion, and affection as well, and expertise. I found that it is very far from what I am going to say, and that maybe my presentation will sound a little bit dry because it's on history, It doesn't go through techniques or whatever. So I first start with, expressing my honor and pleasure to meet Mrs. Suraiya Appa. It's a great opportunity for me, and of course to be with Mrs. Jasleen Damija. She is also a very dear friend and as well as an icon of textile in the world, I can say. And to meet also a group of very important people in my opinion, who not only speak about crafts, who really are planning for the embetterment of craftspeople and the crafts, and for the revival also of crafts, and the acknowledgement of the magic hands of the craft people. I am very honored to meet the people here who preceded our presentation here. Well, very nice meeting you all. So I want also to thank Mrs. Jasleen, because she recommended my name to come here to be in this, in this session, or to have the opportunity of meeting you all. Thank you very much. And thanks for Mrs. Ritu, who really responded and arranged for me to have a speech here or a presentation. Thank you very much, Ritu. I start from the beginning. It is my pleasure to be invited to this event by a recommendation from an icon of textile, Mrs. Jasleen Damija, whose contribution to the textile domain surpasses that of any NGO or official body, as it will last forever for being a reliable guide and reference for the future generations. Your publications are known everywhere. And again, I would like to thank the organizers of the event and Mrs. Ritu Sethi in particular for inviting me to give a short speech on Islamic textiles. In fact, I am not a craftswoman, I am a historian. My specialization is in history of Islamic art and architecture. And Islamic art, of course, it is Islamic crafts. It is important to highlight the fact that Islam was a tolerant religion, and the subjugated local people were not forced by the victor to change their beliefs, traditions, language, or even administrative systems, and thus crafting industries like weaving continued. Hence, we can say that the richness of the Islamic world culture stems from the fact that the Muslim world embraced diversified civilizations to make out of them a unique international global civilization consisting of separate individual but interrelated states, whether kingdoms, empires, or sultanates. Before I start, I forgot to say something, that the name of Suraiya in Arabic means a lighting chandelier, just for you. To come back to the core of our topic on Islamic textiles, I would like to start with a quotation from a 10th century book entitled Al-Tabassur fi Tijara in Arabic, which is an insight into trade by Al-Jahiz an Arab writer, which includes excerpts such as choose a, choose a trade that is most lucrative for you. And the best of trade is that of textiles and clothing. So Fab India is here. At the advent of Islam in the 7th century, the early Arab Muslims in Hijaz, you know, is the western part or end of Saudi Arabia, they were in contact with deep-rooted neighboring civilizations in Iraq, Persia, Yemen, Syria, Asia Minor, as well as Egypt. In other words, the land of Islam was surrounded by flourishing civilizations rich in natural resources and cultural heritage. They where textiles or woven fabrics was a lucrative industry. For instance, during the ancient civilizations in Mesopotamia, where all of you heard about Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, etc., weaving was an important industry in view of the availability of the raw materials as wool, linen, and cotton. The textiles industry in ancient times formed a primary economic resource for the state as it was controlled by the king and the priests. Like the Sumerians and Akkadians in Iraq, the pharaoh's royal court and temple in Egypt were responsible for the organization, management, and nurturing of textile industry. Similarly, Muslim rulers, whether caliphs, kings, sultans, or princes, were interested in trade as it was a source of wealth for the state and the people, and due to the fact that textile trade was a vital source of wealth in the Islamic State, it was deemed as important and was granted special attention. Islam, in such an amalgam of diversified global cultures, asserted itself, and it was not lost, you know. It asserted itself in arts and craft industries, including that of textile, through measures of amendment, modification, selection, and elimination. For instance, as Mrs. Damija had said earlier, silk as a raw material was disregarded by Muslims, being considered as an aspect or manifestation of luxury. Consequently, its use for clothing was restricted to narrow strips of woven or embroidered inscriptions and decorative elements, which were restricted themselves to geometric, floral, and foliated stylized forms. This was due to the rejection of the three-dimensional human, animal, or plant representations, which they were the essence of Hellenistic, culture. Hence, stylization, two-dimensional, and non-zoomorphic decoration are features of Islamic art and crafts, hence of textiles. Talking about tiraz again, one of the significant features of Islamic textiles is the tiraz, which is an Arabized Persian word meaning embroidery. The tiraz concept, in its Islamic notion, was initiated early during the Umayyad Caliph in Damascus, Syria, in the 8th century. It refers to a band that is woven, embroidered, or attached to the edge of a piece of fabric. Such bands, frequently Arabic calligraphy, are horizontal rather than vertical to align with the Arabic script. The period of the Orthodox caliphs, which followed the death of Prophet Muhammad in the 7th century, was austere and void of any luxury. The Umayyads after them, who established a dynasty in the 6th 7th, 8th century in Damascus in Syria, away from Mecca. The Umayyad Caliph Hisham bin Abd al-Malik in the 8th century introduced the tiras concept, and the rest of the caliphs followed suit. This was also relevant to the Abbasid caliphs in Baghdad and the Muslim rulers throughout the Islamic world. They used to have their names and titles woven, embroidered on expensive fabrics with silk, gold, or silver threads. The word tiraz, which is embroidery, subsequently evolved to be applied to textile factories mentioned by Mrs. Damija, so much so that they became known as Dar al-Tiraz or House of al-Tiraz. The Umayyads safeguarded the textile factories that were in existence prior to the Islamic conquests. In fact, there were many factories similar to the al-Tiraz. The Muslims, they kept them as they were. They were kept in their original administrative and organizational conditions, as was the case in Alexandria in Egypt. The factories were classified under two types: private tiraz and public tiraz. The first, private tiraz, was specialized in the production of fabrics for the caliph or ruler, his family, and his court. The products included clothing, upholstery, splendid gifts, and robes of honor, which were occasionally granted to ministers and top officials such as governors, army commanders, judges, clergymen, and the like. Moreover, the private tiraz was responsible for the preparing of the annual covering of the Holy Kaaba. As mentioned earlier, the private tiraz houses extended throughout the Islamic world. Rulers, then, not only the caliph or the head of the state, rulers and princes who were also outside in the governments or districts, established their own private tiraz houses that manufactured all their textile requirements. The management of subsequently the management of the tiraz houses was no longer affiliated to the state, and several of them shifted to the private sector under the ownership of rich individuals. The 10th century, for instance, in the 10th century, one specific owner possessed 80 textile houses or tiraz houses or factories. The other type of tiraz was the public tiraz, or what we say tiraz al-amma. The first was tiraz al-khassa, private, and tiraz al-amma, the public tiraz, which refers to the local factories that specialized in manufacturing fabrics to be used by the common public. They were also employed to assist private tiraz when textiles were in high demand for the state. Initially, the tiraz houses were state-owned, and hence the textile industry was attended to by the caliphs, rulers, and other high officials, particularly during the Abbasid era in Baghdad, when a special administrative bureau called Diwan al-Tiraz, which was created for this purpose. It was led under a supervisor who had also a title, Sahib al-Tiraz, who usually enjoyed high political standing and trust of the caliph or ruler. Thus, both the private and public houses were under strict state supervision in view of their economic and political importance that leads wealth and power to the state. Most of the gifts for rulers outside the Islamic world, to India, let's say, to Rome, to the Byzantines, a lot of textiles were sent as gifts. So they must be impressive. That's why the power, they contributed also to the power of the state. Dar al-Tiras system spread in the Islamic world, including Syria, Iraq, Iran, Anatolia, or Asia Minor at that time, Egypt, North Africa, Sicily, and Spain. Tiras houses or textile factories were indicators of the state's power and weaknesses. The immense production of various textiles was not restricted to Egypt and Iraq. Most of the Islamic countries extending from Transoxania in the east to Morocco, Sicily, Sicily and Andalusia or Spain, because the south of Spain during the Islamic rule was the area was called Andalusia, Al-Andalus. As well as Tabaristan and Azerbaijan in the north and with Armenia as well, and Yemen in the south. All these contributed to the textile production according to the available resources and specializations. To the east of the Caliphate in Baghdad, the textile factories in Iran, reputable in the textiles industry for several centuries prior to the emergence of Islam. They produced the finest and most exquisite textiles. The industry, we have a lot of examples from Persia, before Islam. The industry continued to thrive. State-affiliated private and public Tiras houses were established in many cities in Iran. In Transoxania region, the furthest extended region on the eastern borders of the Islamic world at that time, the capital city of Bukhara collected taxes in the form of specimens of expensive brocade and cotton fabrics. The city of Samarkand as well was a textile hub for goods and merchants. The northern regions of Tabaristan, Azerbaijan, and others, as well as Armenia at the Byzantine borders, enjoyed great reputation in silk weaving and production. They have the mulberry tree, and the silk was produced there. Since the 10th century, Egypt competed with Baghdad in all domains. There was a political conflict at that time, since the 10th century. Tiras houses proliferated throughout the country, and the precious contents of the garments and furnishings, treasures of Egypt's numerous palaces, particularly the upholstery, clothing, and tents, surpassed those of the Abbasid courts in Baghdad. We had a lot of references and classical texts from the 10th, 9th, 10th, 12th, 13th, full of names of textiles and even inventories for the palaces, what they have in their treasuries. The period from 10th century up till the end of the 11th century was considered the golden age of textiles in Egypt. The textile industry peaked in both quantitative and qualitative terms. In addition to the immense local consumption, Egypt exported its textiles to the east and to Rome and some Italian kingdoms in the west, where their intricacy and beauty made them worthy of being used in religious edifices like churches and convents. When we come to the west part of the Islamic world, I prefer to start with Sicily, then go to North Africa and Spain. So the period from Sicily, which was under the Muslim Aghlabids of North Africa rule at the end of the 9th century, was introduced to the Tiras system and manufactured woolen, linen, and silk textiles. In Palermo, there was a market that especially catered to the Tiras manufacturers. When Sicily was seized by the Norman king at the end of the 11th century, the textile industry was not affected and vastly developed. The Normans established textile factories that resembled the Muslim Tiras houses. North Africa and Morocco were considered to be the least productive in textiles and least interested in the Tiraz system among the Islamic countries, the other Islamic countries. North Africa flourished only when the region was split into small independent dynasties. Following this division, the rulers established Tiraz houses in their palaces and other locations. For example, Tiraz houses were established in Al Qayrawan city in Tunisia, present Tunisia, at the 10th century after becoming a governorate of the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad in the early 10th century. It was then one of the greatest North African cities and the country's largest and most important trading hub. Later, when the Ubaydis took over, Al-Mahdiya city, which was the capital, flourished to the extent that its exports, including textiles, reached eastward to the Iranian island of Kish in the Gulf. Fez, which I'm sure everybody knows about Fez in Morocco, the main Islamic city in the farthest west of North Africa, was renowned for manufacturing and dyeing textiles, and it still holds this reputation till to date. It had more than 3,000 Tiraz houses and 100 dyeing factories, which were not controlled by the state. Fez was bustling with merchants and artisans from various countries, and in the 12th century, the number of lodges accommodating merchants reached approximately to 500 lodges. Arts and crafts industries of the East entered Spain following the Arab-Muslim conquest at the beginning of the 8th century. In the 10th century, the full Tiraz system was introduced to Spain, including the Tiraz houses and the Tiraz supervisors, Sahib al-Tiraz. There was a special quarter that catered to the Tiraz specialties and weavers. The first Tiraz house, or Dar al-Tiraz, was run under the administration of the palace of the Andalusian or Spanish Umayyad Caliphate. You know, we had the Umayyad Caliphate. It started, of course, or it was established in Damascus in Syria. Then a branch, part of them, they went to Spain, and they established also another, it is Umayyad dynasty, we call it. It has the same name because it's the same family, but it's in the west. Textile weaving was not restricted to the capital Cordova, which everybody knows, which at one point had a total of 13,000 weavers. The Tiraz system was also present in other cities like Almeria, Malaga, Seville, and others. After the central Spanish Umayyad Caliphate was dissolved and the era of the local dynasties Muluk al-Tawa'if emerged during the first half of the 11th century, economic progress was coupled with a booming commercial bourgeoisie. Thus, the textile industry in general advanced and peaked during the 13th century, and accordingly the agriculture of flax and cotton flourished, as well as safflower, which was used for dyeing textiles. The textile clustered in southern space in Spain, in Andalusia. The Tiraz houses proliferated throughout Cordova, Almeria, Seville, Malaga, and other cities, where each city specialized in different types of textile. For example, in Almeria, there were 800 looms for weaving silk with Tiraz, and 1,000 looms for weaving exquisite brocade. The textile industry, like other industries, declined in the 13th century due to the devastating Mughal invasion. They recovered later under the support and patronage of certain ruling lineages, which nurtured and encouraged crafts and arts, namely the Mamluk sultans in Egypt, 13th to 16th century, the Safavid Shahs in Persia, 16th to 18th century, the Ottoman sultans in Turkey, 13th to 20th century, and the Mughal emperors in India, 16th to 19th century. Okay. As for the Mamluks in Egypt, trade expanded because they controlled and monopolized the world trade routes, linking east and west via the Red Sea. This led to an increase in Egypt's wealth, which was reflected on all aspects of infrastructure, including industries and arts. The textile industry contributed a large portion of this wealth. Affluence allowed the Egyptians to spend tremendous amounts of money on luxurious and exquisite kinds of textiles, to the extent that silk, which was forbidden or was still forbidden, was their preferable fabric or for clothing. يعني money sometimes make miracles. I have to speak about the Mughal emperors in India. Yeah, all craft industries and arts flourished. The textile industry, similar to other industries, was under complete state supervision. The Mughal emperors were also greatly inspired by the Iranian artists, craftsmen, and textile manufacturers. This led to the emergence of some Iranian attributes in their products that encompassed both the local Indian and Iranian styles. It was inevitable that the cotton industry flourished during the Mughal emperor's reign, as it was an ancient Indian industry that was practiced by their ancestors throughout the ages. During the reign of Emperor Shah Jahan, silk embroidered fabrics prospered, characterized by their profuse decorations, a diversity and abundance of colors, and an excessive use of gold threads woven or embroidered on clothing, scarves, and saris. Velvet fabric also flourished under their rule, and the foliate and floral motifs were not stylized but fully implemented in a manner that simulated nature. It is worth naming, before ending this paper, a number of the textile manufacturing cities and the specific fabrics they produce. If I want put a list, it will be a very long list. But I give examples. For instance, Damascus, Syria was known for its brocade. In Egypt, the kubati or white linen fabric was from Damietta. The richly colored fabric, washi, from Alexandria, which I almost say that washi is iqat, could be iqat. Bukalamun from Tunis, the qasab or gauze fine linen from Dabiq, the mulaham from Khurasan, and so on and so forth. In conclusion, it is noteworthy to mention that the Islamic textiles in general held a high standing throughout the world. Although the Islamic countries inherited the weaving industry from preceding civilizations, they developed the industry, excelled in it, and created new styles and techniques. The Islamic textiles products and expertise eventually spread to Europe. Unsatisfied with importing Islamic textiles from the Orient, Near East, North Africa, and Spain, Europe, and France in particular, sought the help of Arab and Spanish Muslims from Spain to establish textile factories and train the indigenous craftspeople. And thank you very much for listening.
Pressures from the organizers. Yes.
Forgive me, but I wanted to share with you the impact of the Crusaders in the introduction of the Harlequin shawl. There is the Harlequin shawl, which is the one which has stripes at the end in the shawl.
Yes.
The end of the shawl has multicolored shawl borders. And those borders which were introduced were, which was introduced by the dress which was worn by the Sufis of Egypt. The Sufis of Egypt even today wear multiple skirts with which they swirl around.
The swirling.
The swirling dervishes, and which has multiple. And they brought this tradition of the swirling dervishes different from the Turkish.
Yes.
This is different. These are, and as they swirl, the multicolored threads have these beautiful skirts of different colors swirling around. And this tradition was taken to Europe, to Venice, and that became the part of the traditions of the woven patterns which became a part of the whole thing. And the traditions there became known as the Harlequin shawls.
Thank you.
You see? I'm just saying, look at the intermingling. Look at the, there is also the cultural traditions of the Venice dell'arte. That also came from these whirling dervishes. And those whirling dervishes, tradition which came and was absorbed into the theater depicting the fool. You see, because they were the ones who, and the fool traveled up and became the fool in the Shakespearean traditions. I can't tell you how things mingle and interweave, and are involved. That is what Suraiya and I have worked on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have the pleasure of the release of the book which you have written, and I think the protocol is going to be that you will present it to the speakers. Ritu? Suraiya?
will be presenting the book to all the speakers who are present.
Yeah.
And those who aren't.
Why don't you come here?
Later. May I request you to present the book to all the speakers? We have a number of them in the room, and those who come in later, if you're here, it would be marvelous. But we can start with, yeah, but I think that this is Jocelyn's copy, which she very kindly.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We would like to have them signed. Yes, I want you to
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
How many things?
I was going to say, may I? What's Anita?
We have
Anita?
Thank you.
David? There she is.
We have Arushi, who is in the fourth session.
Anamika? Sorry?
Call them and they'll come up and get the book. Yeah.
We can take a photo down.
Imran Qureshi ji and Abdul ji. आप आइए.
Ah. Naseem is where? Naseem? Naseem bhai? What about Mayank is here? Mayank? Aditi is not here. Anamika? Anamika? She was here? Yeah. There she is.
She's behind you.
Yes.
PhD on the
Oh, fantastic.
And Ritu, what about one for BIM? She's also a speaker. And Ritu, who is not here.
Fantastic.
He was here. I saw him go out.
I saw him too.
He'll come back.
Then he comes back.
You can give him.
ये जो मयांक के साथ बैठी हुई है, ये कौन थी? ये क्या बैठी थी? कौन है?
नहीं मालूम. ये जो बैठी है मैं I don't know.
ये कौन थी? कौन है?
I don't know. Ritu, do we have a few minutes for a few? Do we have any questions for Dr. Gada?
Yes.
Please.
I am not an expert on crafts. Don't ask me
She's a
about technique.
historian. And we made her skip a few bits, so I'm sorry for that.
I would have loved to hear about the Safavid as well. Okay. My question is, you mentioned about a 12th century book, historical book, which spoke about the most preferred occupation.
It is the 10th century,
10th century.
not 12th.
My question is that in historical sources, is there any mention of the looms and the Okay. Is there any mention of the looms and the technical processes that were involved? That is my first question. And my second is that, was there a hierarchy of weavers, in terms of the products that they wove? Especially in Baghdad or in the Ottoman or Umayyad period. Thank you.
In fact, in the resources I have come across for my dissertation, there were a lot of names of textiles, and sometimes they just give a very short description, like when they say mulaham, they say it is a silk with wool or something like that. But I did not come across names of weavers but I will start from now on really to pay attention to this. So I will do my best to do that. Yeah.
So we are making you cross over the floor from history, the historian to World Crafts Council.
Yeah. By the way, the Encyclopedia of Islam is already launched.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you get it?
This one here first.
I can get it.
So, my question or suggestion to Dr. Gada is, we've heard so much about the intermingling of so many diverse cultures to add to the depth of Islamic textiles. Is there already a sort of a network agency or, some sort of a repository where newbies like us can actually, access this wealth of information that is even in this room today? And if not, is that something we can think about and, maybe put that in place? Because it is so hard for us to access a lot of this information that exists, and we are sort of reinventing the wheel again and, going back to research which has maybe already been done.
Unfortunately, most of them are in Arabic, not translated. Some are translated, and I'll be happy to give you maybe a list of references where you can go and look for.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Navina?
I once was in Kashmir and I came across this tradition of the grandfather singing and making people, his students, sing, weave, sing, embroider. Do you come across any such traditions or any such songs?
No, thank you. No, I haven't. Sorry, I haven't. I read more on literature, because in the Islamic world, the Arabs were more interested in history, lineage, poetry, literature, more than crafts. That's why we don't have a lot of, references. Poems. Well, the poem you have mentioned about the Taylasan,
Yes.
the poem which was mentioned by Mrs. Jasleen about the Taylasan, it is just a description by a poet who was famous about the river of Dijla, where it is white, you said, and in the middle, the Taylasan is the inscriptional embroidery, which is the tiraz. There are descriptions, a lot of descriptions, and naming of textiles in poetry, I collected some poems on textiles, especially in the Abbasid period, where they have a lot of gardens, and so I have, and we came also across descriptions of old textile pieces from let's say from Iran during the conquest of the Arab. They seized one carpet which was of silk, which was used by Kisra or the Sassanid emperor at that time. It was all embroidered in silk embroidered with the gold and silver threads and studded with gems, precious stones. Emeralds was used for the leaves, and rubies were used for the flowers, etc. And because they said that he used to use this, sit on it in winter, because there were no flowers in winter, no flowers, no gardens, so he used to sit on that carpet, very big carpet, like we call now the garden carpets, where you have two rivers or crossed together, and on the four sides you have gardens. It was similar like that. So this was one of the things described. Some pieces are described, but no technique or the weaving or
May I just, sorry.
No, go ahead.
In the question that you asked about singing and music.
Yes, this
Are
is for
you
you.
are you referring to the tradition of the talim,
Of the what? Of the.
that which is in Kashmir? She was saying that when you were in Kashmir, you heard the grandfather singing. This is the tradition of the talim.
Yeah.
Ta'lim.
Talim.
Ta'lim, teaching.
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 But what is it's used in the shawl weaving? It is so complicated, and the kani shawl, the woven shawl. She's wearing one. You are wearing a recent one, and the kani shawl with its elaborate patterns need to be written down, and so the weavers would give you, they would write down the description of the manner in which it is to be woven. So it is beautiful. Sorry? You know, I mean, like they are sitting, the talim is written down, the master weaver will call out the tarim and sing it. He will say, you know, it will be in Persian, saying, 2 red, 2 yellow, 1 green, in a sing-song, beautiful way. And they will weave it in. This is what you heard.
Yes.
You are asking if there is anything in the in
I think the Jamdani they have the same thing. The Jamdani.
In the carpet.
Carpets and the Jamdani, I think.
No, in Jamdani they don't sing it.
The master, he
No,
has
they
a
have the
poem.
pattern which they follow. There's no saying it. In
No, but
Jamdani.
you are saying in Damascus.
Yeah, in Damascus. I don't know about.
I see. There is mention
You know better.
about the for the elaborate brocading
Yes.
of Damascus.
Yeah.
It was famous for brocade.
Yeah.
Up till now.
Yeah.
Damascus is up till now, you know, and the Damask in French comes from Damascus.
There's a question here and then.
May I request that we carry on our discussions over lunch, because we will then roll over in the next session. But we are all
okay.
having lunch together.
Thank
so
you
we
all.
can all talk at lunchtime.
Let's ask the rest of the questions from.
That gentleman has been wanting to raising his hand.
There's one more question that we'll take before
Yes,
we.
please.
Yeah.
I'm making a request.
Ritu,
Please.
just one request. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khada. You mentioned about state control of textile and varieties of forms of production, but what is the tension between state control and, for example, creativity? And secondly, in this kind of intermingling, the making of a global Islamic culture and civilization, also the kind of tensions, because there is a tension between heterodoxy and orthodoxy in terms of Islamic values, and so in terms of building upon that tradition of tolerant culture today, given the kind of challenges we are, what we can learn to make alive that weaving of the liberal in the contemporary world.
In fact, the state interference or the state control was not on the decoration or the making. The state control was on, the industry selling and getting the money from the textiles you know, it's not, or let's say, providing the dar at-tiras or with the raw materials, helping and supporting the, but they do not interfere in the designs or whatever. Just they care for their names, their titles, and sometimes the year of. So this is the state, and sometimes they can, of course, interfere with the private tiras when they need more, for more export. They just control also the private tiras to introduce, to produce more and more for the government. But they do not interfere in the, you know, in the technical or
The design.
the decorative matters. Yeah. So, and about this orthodoxy and so on, it's a long story which took place between, you know, Fatimids and Abbasids and so on. It was quite a long period. And I don't know, maybe today we see some examples of that, which we better not mention.
So may we all thank Jasleen and Dr. Dada for these beautiful presentations. And now lunch. And the conversation can continue.
Those who have questions, you know, somebody who knows a great deal is Asif. So don't let him escape you. And Asif and Jenny can.
No, then please tell us again. Teach us back. Huh?